we're thrilled because Forrester has prepared an exclusive research on wearables, which is another LeWeb trend. Forrester Research has also curated that trend with us. So I'm delighted to welcome on stage James McQuivey, who is the Vice President and Principal Analyst of Forrester Research and also author of Digital Disruption. So please help me welcome James on stage. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Loïc. Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'll stop there. It's about all the languages I can do. As you have just heard, I'm James McQuivey from Forrester Research, Vice President and Principal Analyst and author of the book Digital Disruption. It's my pleasure to be with you today to talk about wearables. But before I introduce the experts that we have curated into joining me for the next hour, I feel like I want you to introduce yourselves to me. I'm going to do that through one question. The question is, by show of hands, who has ever owned a Palm Pilot? Palm Pilot. Most of the room. Okay, now keep your hands up if you still use it. Okay, no one. That was pretty safe. Now think about this from the perspective of the iPod. I won't ask for a show of hands, but most of us have probably owned one or more. And most of us have started to use them less and less or have moved on altogether. Think of the same thing for digital cameras. What am I pointing out about these devices? Were they a failure? Or did they succeed so well that we actually couldn't live without them, and we needed instead to put them into this device? That is, in fact, what happened. The transition to information, entertainment, personal connections, and communication was so important to us that we could no longer let it live in a dedicated device, but instead had to let it collapse into the gravity of this mobile device. Now, some will argue that that's where it stays, that gravity is inescapable, and that it's time now for us to live in the mobile forever. I'm here to introduce you to the idea that that is not, in fact, the case, that instead, this well of gravity is compressing so tightly that it is about to explode. And what does it mean when mobile explodes? It means we take the sensors, the experiences, the software from this device, and we start to repopulate the world with it. Not devices that compete with it, but that devices that work with it. We will have those sensors and those experiences in our cars, in our homes. We will have them on, near, and in our bodies. Take cameras, microphones, any number of information gathering or entertainment and social communication experiences and place them out around the periphery of our bodies. And that is what we'll talk about for this hour. What does that look like? Why do we believe that it is going to happen soon? In fact, I argue urgently. Now, the good news is we are sharing with you today some data that have never been published from Forrester Research so that you get first access. Then we will be sharing it later with the rest of the world. Data about demand for wearables that makes it not only an explosion that is interesting, but one that is imperative for you and urgent. So with that, let me jump right into introducing the first of our experts, my colleague, Vice President and Principal Analyst, J.P. Gownder from Forrester Research, our head and lead in the wearables research space and called by firm Analytica, one of the 25 most influential people in the wearable space. Please join me in welcoming to the stage J.P. Gownder.
Good morning, LeWeb. I am J.P. Gownder. The number one question that I get from people is, why are you so passionate about wearables? Well, of course, Wearables are fun, they're cool. That's part of it. I get to talk to a lot of great companies, including startups, including 20-year-old people who have just started out, who are making a difference. That's fun. Ultimately, I enjoy separating the hype from the reality. And so for the last 2 years, I've spent my time doing research, conducting interviews, writing survey questions, surveying a variety of audiences, and taking all of that insight to put into an analysis. And I want to share that analysis with you today. That analysis is all about 5 urgent truths in the wearable computing space. So this is going to be a moment where you see a giant snake. Nothing is more urgent than this. This is the inland taipan. It's the most venomous snake in the world. More than 80% of people who are bitten by this snake will die unless they receive anti-venom treatment. Now, I want all of you to imagine for a moment that your job is in construction, mining, energy. These are dangerous jobs to begin with, right? Take that job now to the Australian outback, which is where the inland taipan snake lives. In the outback, companies have 2 key assets that they must take care of. One of them is their infrastructure. The other is their workforce. If either of these 2 things fails, the company loses money. But more importantly, the health and welfare of the workforce is literally at stake. Whether it is the taipan snake, heat stroke, or conditions that can change in just an instant, the outback makes taking care of workers an urgent, urgent need. So what do we do about this? Well, the Australian construction and services company, Tees, faces this problem all the time. They have to send their workers out into the outback. They've noticed that the snakes are getting more aggressive toward their workers, particularly in the springtime. And so they're trialing wearable technology to track their workforce in real time. They're using healthcare wearables to track things like activity levels, heart rate, blood oxygenation, and temperature. If something goes wrong with one of their workers, they can intervene in real time, and they can take care of those workers. So I think we've seen that wearables can help address some urgent needs for workers. But what is it about wearables more generally that makes them urgent? Why are we using that word urgent? People want them. I would bet that the latent demand for wearable technology is greater than you probably think today. Now wait, JP, you say. I've heard that only 10% of US online adults are using fitness trackers and only 4% of Europeans. I've also heard that Nike is walking away from the fuel ban. These are the signs of an early market that is changing. I don't want you to be deceived, though. People are intrigued at the prospect of getting wearable devices. Even at this early stage, when very few vendors have released major products, 45% of US online adults and 32% of European online adults say that they're intrigued by the prospect of getting a wearable device. Another measure is a little more indirect. People who get tired of pulling their phones out of their pocket all the time are very good candidates for things like smartwatches or smart glasses. And so we see a growing number of people feel this way. And despite bad recent press, Google Glass actually intrigues many consumers as well. Despite all the negative press about privacy and about violating people's privacy in public spaces and that sort of thing, if the price were right, a number of people would be interested. In fact, when we look at the entire body, we find that consumers are interested in wearable devices all across a range of locations on the body. So for the first time today, we debut the data in the US and the EU on wearable interest in all of these locations. We've also just published a blog post at blogs.forrester.com so that you can look at this in more depth. But I want you to notice some hot spots. The wrist. Over a third of US and European consumers are interested in a wrist-based wearable. Clothing, embedded in my clothing or clipped onto my clothing or shoes, comes up at an underappreciated level of interest. And smart earbuds and smart glasses probably register higher than you might think. And this interest is growing, in some cases very quickly. Between 2013 and 2014 in the United States, we saw interest in wearables on the wrist, the earbud, the glasses. All of these went up at a rapid pace, but in fact, every location on the body saw an increased level of interest between 2013 and 2014. What does this mean? Well, it makes it an urgent opportunity for those vendors who sell these devices. It's also making it an urgent opportunity for marketers who would like to engage with these customers. But if consumers can be said to be interested, businesses want wearables even more urgently. Why? Because businesses understand that equipping workers with a wearable device can create tangible return on investment, as we saw with Tees in Australia. We surveyed IT and business leaders all across the globe, and 52% of them said that wearable computing would be a critical, high, or moderate priority for their organization in the year 2015. This is an interest level that's comparable to where mobile was in 2010. And while many of these experiments are at the very early stages, proof of concept, pilot, trial, it's not hard to find real companies who are using workforce wearables. Like technical inspectors at Japan Airlines, who can now use Google Glass to take photos of airline maintenance issues. They can send those photos from the tarmac to a call center where experts can look in detail at those photos and can give more accurate appraisals of what's going on. Or shift workers who can use a smartwatch-based application in order to check in for their shift, check out from their shift, or even, and this is good for the worker, trade their shift with another worker in real time. But of course, businesses don't really just want to give workers wearables. They want to use wearables to reshape their entire business model in some cases. They're thinking beyond their current business models to try to figure out how can we engage our customers at their mobile moment of need with wearables. In the UK, Virgin Atlantic Airways recently completed a very successful trial of Google Glass at their upper-class lounge in Heathrow Airport. Using Glass, the agents were able to give information like flight connections, the weather at your destination, even a restaurant recommendation to the flyers, the customers. Virgin Atlantic found this to be very successful, and they're planning to roll this out further in 2015 to new locations. And they're also dedicated to continuing experimentation with wearable devices for customer service. Now, as organizations like Virgin Atlantic find success with customer service applications, they're almost going to be forced to rethink some of their business models as well. Sometimes the wearable is worn by the customer herself. Barclaycard's BPay band in the UK allows people to make small purchases, a coffee, a newspaper, even a ride on the London Tube, all with the swipe of a wrist. The football club Southampton in the UK is taking this to the next level. They're using BPay band as a digital guide to the stadium. They, of course, allow season ticket holders to purchase goods and services like food in the stadium with BPay band, but they're also creating a whole new range of digital experiences to engage their ticket holders. So these kinds of experiments give you the opportunity to reshape your customer experience. The company Nivea is trying to extend its value proposition at the beach beyond just sunscreen. Using wearables, they're empowering parents to track the location of their children at the beach using a smartphone app. This is a pretty urgent need when the kids get a little bit too close to the water. By extending your value proposition into adjacent need states of this kind, a brand can extend its influence with its customers. And Vivimetrica is building an entirely new business in this space. They're taking data from consumer wearables, and they're using big data analytics to see how behaviors can predict disease states like diabetes or heart disease. Vivimetrica can then sell those insights from that data analysis to consumers, to healthcare providers, to insurance companies, or to anyone else in the healthcare ecosystem. So consumers want wearables for their lives, businesses want them for their workers, and also to reshape their customer experience. And all of this interest is leading to an explosion of experimentation. In fact, I think you'll be surprised where wearables show up. You won't be able to tell always at first glance whether a wearable device is a pretender or whether it's going to succeed. Wearables will, of course, wind up on our bodies, whether it is Ralph Lauren with the Polo Tech Smart Shirt featuring ohm signal technology, which debuted at the US Open tennis tournament this year on the ball boys and ball girls, or Duceri's Le Chal shoe, which offers a screen-free version of GPS. Using haptic feedback in the soles of the shoe, it can take you where you want to go without you looking at any screen at all. They'll wind up on your kids and on your pets. Philip gives parents peace of mind by knowing exactly where their children are and how they can reach them at a moment's notice. Voice aims to make our pets healthier, which seems like a fun thing. They're using location-based analytics and activity tracking to help dog owners understand how they can treat their dogs better to make them healthier. And they're also going to wind up inside our bodies to make us healthier. Colonoscopy is a very dangerous and uncomfortable procedure. PillCam aims to eliminate both problems by giving doctors digital imagery of what's going on inside of our bodies. It's more comfortable for the patient, it gives the doctor better information, and in the future, these kinds of technologies are going to make us all healthier. So where do all these devices lead us? Well, the end game here is something that we call services for the all-body network. That is to say, wearables aren't really about devices at all at the end of the day. They're about services that take data to and from these wearables to give users insights so that we can take better actions, so that we can be healthier, we can make our dogs healthier, we can do our jobs better, and that sort of thing. So it's not about any particular device, but it's not always just about one device. Sometimes it's about multiple devices in the all-body network. Mayo, the Thalmic Labs armband, combined with Google Glass, gives users a better way to interact. It's better than either device would be on its own. We predict that this kind of thing will continue. We think that Apple, for example, is going to do this with Beats headphones. Integrating Siri into Beats headphones would allow a user to interact with their phone and their Apple Watch all at the same time. Services matter in this game, as I said. Wearables, any given device could fail. In fact, I would predict that 80% of the devices that you see in the next year are going to fail because we're in a period of great experimentation. So instead, it's all about services that take data from the wearable device to the cloud, do some analytical look at that data, and then give you those insights to make your life better. This is where the innovation lies. This is where the long-term value will sit, in the cloud. And major companies, Microsoft, Apple, Samsung, Salesforce.com, Google, they all see this opportunity. They all see it, and they're all approaching it in their own way. Apple with a relatively closed ecosystem. Microsoft with a surprisingly open one. Salesforce going after that enterprise opportunity. Each of these major players sees urgency in forging a new kind of relationship with their customers through cloud services. So where does this lead us in the future? Well, you and I have a choice in the future. We're going to be able to share with the brands that we like and that we trust information: who I am, where I am, what I need, how I feel, how I respond to various stimuli. Armed with this information, companies will be able to address the most urgent needs of their workers and also their customers. And companies will be able to forge an intimate relationship with their customers that's never been seen before. To think of this, I'd like you to imagine the Disney Magic Band of the future. Today, Magic Band can tell Disney who you are, where you are, and to some extent, even what you need. Adding biometrics to the device, however, would tell Disney how you feel and how you respond to stimuli. Did you enjoy the ride that you just took at Disney World? How much did you enjoy it? Maybe even, is this person in the mood to spend money on a souvenir? For Disney, taking this kind of insight will allow them to personalize the experience that you have in their theme park even more. And ultimately, there's nothing more urgent for Disney than forging that kind of a relationship with their customer. So that's why I want all of you here, the influencers at LeWeb 2014, to make wearables a priority in 2015 and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, JP. Wonderful to have that data. We'll have some questions for JP later when we go to the panel. But first, I'd like to introduce our next expert. I'm going to bring to the stage David Rose. He's an instructor and researcher at MIT's Media Lab. He is also the author of a recent book, Enchanted Objects, very worth the read. And he's a serial entrepreneur himself, currently the CEO of Ditto Labs. And I'm hoping he'll be able to share with you some of what he's working on in that area. David Rose.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm on a mission to make technology more embedded, more incidental, and more elegant. And let me show you what I mean. The topic of this morning is called, or this section is called Wearables, which I think is a really awkward term. I mean, the industry has called the general idea of having the phone explode and embed in everyday objects. They've called it pervasive computing, UbiComp for ubiquitous computing, and I think all of those terms are really awkward. So I have a new term for this morning, which is enchanted objects, which I think sets a higher bar for all of us as designers. Can I show you something? Yes. Who remembers Frodo's sword from Middle-earth? It was an enchanted object that was inspiring to me. Remember what it does? It's both a sword and then also has an enchanted capability of glowing when orcs are nearby. That's really convenient, right? It's an object that anticipates its own use. Well, for a company called Ambient Devices, we made an enchanted umbrella that you need around Paris today or yesterday, which is simply glows when rain is forecast through AccuWeather for your zip code. So again, it's just an ordinary object that has just a little bit of AI, just the thinnest layer of AI to become useful. For me, this is sort of emblematic of how simple these things could become. It's also emblematic of this jump between a fictional object, a fairy tale, a Greek myth, and an object that we should be creating. I really enjoyed in the book Enchanted Objects going back to Hans Christian Andersen and to the Brothers Grimm to sort of discover, like, what are these things that we want, that we long for, that are human drives, because these objects from these stories that run in our cultural bloodstream should be inspiring and should inspire us. So think about, from the Brothers Grimm story, the mirror that identifies who's the fairest of them all. There's a company called Memory Mirror that is now working with Neiman Marcus to reveal the fairest outfit of them all, and it also lets you see your ass. I created this periodic table that's at enchantedobjects.com so that you can sort of organizing all of these internet-connected things. I covered about 50 of them in the book, sort of by aspirations, by these aspirations that have existed forever, the aspirations to be all-knowing or for telepathy. Let me show you my house, because it reveals about 10 things that we're living with now.
Enchanted objects are ordinary things that have the same functionality that they had before, except now they can talk. They're connected. These are ordinary things that have extraordinary capabilities.
When we're creating technology for the home, really we want to make something that's seamless and transparent, and that as opposed to having things sort of call out and draw your attention to it, make it a more ambient experience.
We'll just continue to behave with those everyday objects as we do in the world, and we can remain focused on connectivity between two people.
What we're seeing now is this proliferation of different devices that are, moving out from the cell phone and onto our bodies and into the world.
So in the middle of our living room is a coffee table that has Google Earth embedded in the coffee table. And I just found that having access to this amazing zoomable map completely changes how often we talk about travel and how often we talk about the world and how often we look up places that are mentioned. And it's nice to have this beautiful large reference object sitting in the middle of our living space. Our devices can be a lot simpler, and the interaction to them can be a lot simpler. The internet-connected umbrella can just be an umbrella that only shows whether it's going to rain. You don't need to tap on an icon or do anything that seems sort of artificial.
We come from a time in which we need to adapt to our homes and not the other way around. So what if our home could be a platform that we personalize and we customize? The key is, how do we create this ecosystem, these technologies that allow us to move from one experience to the other in the most seamless, most magical way.
Some people might think that a connected home is overwhelming, that there'll be so much information in the connected home that it's just a cacophonous environment and you wouldn't want to live there. But I think about how we decorate our homes today. We put photographs everywhere, we put paintings up, we put Post-it notes up. There's a lot of decoration and adornment in the home. And I think if enchanted objects can be designed in the right way, we're going to want hundreds of them around us.
I think what we're going to see is a new renaissance where designers as well as computer scientists are going to really make a really big impact in the type of technology that we see in the home.
The history of computers has mostly been about efficiency. I think one of the things that's changing is that enchanted objects can be about adding motion and add magic to the fabric of our everyday lives and experiences.
How many people want one of those Google Earth tables? It's really nice, with a little leap controller for gesture. All right, so let's just dive into it. Just a couple more examples of these objects. And actually, there are a couple of them that I'm wearing, and we can talk about them on the panel. But this idea of being all-knowing is one I think that a lot of technology companies hope to satisfy. For me, the sort of historical object that does this in fairy tales are either a looking glass, where you can have clairvoyance, or a frosted glass ball, a crystal ball. I made this ball called the Ambient Orb over 10 years ago that shows you information that you care about super summarized just into a color. So you can know what the weather's going to be tomorrow in your zip code, what the pollen count is if you have an asthmatic kid, whether there's too much or not enough wind for sailing, what the first derivative of barometric pressure is in case you're a fisherman, or taking care of your garden, or traffic, etc. It just one-dimensionalizes the information. The company today, Ambient Devices, is just working with energy companies to try to communicate what's the price of energy right now, if it's being dynamically priced, and how much are you using in the house through this glanceable display that you just encounter. Now, the encountering it is really the point here, which I think is, this is the promise for enchanted objects, is you want the sensing to be transparent, and you want the display to be unavoidable. Because I think the real lesson that we learned about the orb was if you map data there, people will pay attention to it and people will make a change. And if it's buried in an app on your phone, forget about it. For telepathy, how many people remember the Weasley clock? It was like a location-based service in Mrs. Weasley's kitchen. It showed a hand for every member of the house. Well, when I was a kid, we listened to Peter and the Wolf as an LP, where every character in the story has a different ringtone. So inspired by this, I created a doorbell for our house that plays ringtones for that family member as they're homeward bound. So it's a really nice way to sort of hear the fact that your kid is on the way or your wife is on the way home, which can be convenient for multiple reasons. In order to keep you safe, there are a lot of technologies, including the Perot here from Paris, the flower power device. The one that I wanted to highlight today are some wallets that we made in conjunction with a bank, in this case, Bank of America. The problem that they presented was people have no sense of how they're doing against a budget. So we put a variable resistance hinge and a wireless chip in an ordinary leather wallet so that as you blow through your budget that month, it becomes harder and harder to open the wallet. But just think about this. This is what I mean by incidental and subtle in terms of these interfaces. They can use your visual perception system, they can use audio, they can use haptics, and ultimately we want information presented in this way because it's just calmer. I got a chance to work on this product at my last company called the Vitality Glow Cap, and we just tried to make ordinary medication packaging smarter. It was acquired by a company in California, but when we worked with Harvard Medical School and we gave them out to people and we just said, just use this rather than your ordinary pill cap, this is what the data looks like. These are days and people, and pink means they didn't open the cap. This is what the control group looked like. When we turned on the prompts, the reminders, the social feedback loop, the doctor accountability, and the automatic refill through the pharmacy, those 4 feedback loops change behavior dramatically. And what I love about this example is there's an indigenous business model here, because the pharma company makes 30% more rev, the insurance company can save, in the US, it's $300 billion lost due to hospitalizations that happen due to medication non-adherence. So it's a huge market for subsidizing getting enchanted objects into your life. And AT&T loves it, and so do other telcos, because, again, it's a totally subsidized way of giving away the technology. This was an advertisement that they did that included the glow cap as well as a device for a dog.
Medicine talks to you.
All right, we'll talk about the wee things later. The last thing I wanted to tell you in the last minute and a half that I have is about what I'm doing now. So I've been interested in the embedding of cameras in everything from pens to paintbrushes. This is another project from the Media Lab. And today, I've been taking a picture of you every 30 seconds using this wearable life logging camera. And when I look at my own data for this, I start to see interesting things. How often am I outside? How often am I inside? When am I snacking? Am I spending people with people? Are the people depressed? Are they laughing at me? You know, it gives you this interesting digital portrait of yourself. But you also realize that this camera wants image recognition. It really wants to be able to automatically count these things. So I started a company 2 years ago called Ditto. You can try it today. It's at ditto.us.com. That really opens the black box of all of these photos that are being shared on social media. Today, there are 1.8 billion photos every day that are shared on social. And that's even before people are wearing cameras like life logging cameras. So what we're doing is we're running about 300 servers in parallel in Amazon's cloud to look for fabric patterns, brands, products, and scenes. So we look exhaustively for 3,000 products in all of the photos that are shared on social, including all of Tumblr. And it reveals a lot of data. And I guess I'd encourage you to try this. You can go to streamditto.com to see what's being discovered right now and to see the trends in terms of, I guess, Hennessy is up, and see what the photo share is, which gives you a measure of brand power in all of these photos. So just like social listening through photos, because they're already being shared, I think is one of the next big things. I mean, obviously, it's a big data, big cloud meets internet-connected everything. So you can start to see who is sharing my brand. In this case, before this morning, I took McDonald's as a brand, and you could download the 400,000 people directly from the site in order to do a Twitter ad campaign against those people. As one of our investors said, you can Heineken the shit out of the Bud people. So you can find the people who are exhibiting a behavior, download the list of them, and start to reach out to them, either directly through an ambassador program or through an automatic ad targeting. So I'll save the story of the trash can because I'm out of time. But I guess in conclusion, I think there's an opportunity to use ordinary things imbued with a little bit of extraordinariness because of computation and connectivity that will make our interface to technology more tangible, haptic, embedded. And the results of that will be how we get information, how we connect with others, how we stay safe, how we enjoy health, how we move around in the world, and how we learn, create, and play together, and maybe even disrupt advertising. Thank you. Thanks.
Well done, David. Thank you. I'm going to invite you to stay. Join us here on the couch. We've got a few more experts to join us. I've got questions already in mind for JP and David, and some more of our guests here who I'll introduce right now. First, let me welcome to the stage the CEO of Withings, French company you might be familiar with. If you were walking around yesterday, you may have seen the ubiquitous advertisements for Withings, the scale perhaps you're most familiar with. Cedric Hutchings is with us here. Let me introduce him and have him come to the stage. Thank you, Cedric, for joining us with that wonderful intro music.
Hi.
Second, joining us on stage now, we'll have Stéphane Marceau. Stéphane is the CEO of a company called OmSignal. It's a company you may not be familiar with if you're not familiar with fabric and fashion. But I predict you will be familiar very, very soon. Let us welcome, please, to the stage, Stéphane Marceau. And then finally, to complete our panel, I'll have us reintroduce JP Gownder from Forrester. JP, I don't know if they'll redo the music for you, but you're welcome to join us. Here you go. How are you? Have a seat. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here on the panel. What we're going to do is spend some time. We actually have a timer in front of us, so let's get right to it. So you've all been introduced, but we have not yet heard from Cedric and Stéphane. So I'd like to go to you first, Cedric. I happen to be wearing a Moto 360 watch, for example. You're wearing something a little different. I'd like to know what it is, and if you'll tell us a little bit about where you think this wearable space is going from your perspective at Withings.
Thank you, and thanks a lot for the invitation. So Withings has been doing now for years tools to help live healthier life. Tools that generate insights and maybe some motivation coaching to slightly change our behavior. So all that will definitely work only if we find ways to be part of our daily life on the long term. And I didn't see earlier how many people raised their hands when they had these fitness trackers they wear for a couple of weeks or months and then drop it. Mm-hmm. So we try, and this week we're coming with Activité, which is the first ever Swiss-made watch that happens to integrate, embed the sensors, but not in a form of a device that will speak for geeks, but for the rest of us.
That's the thing, and I think we have pictures. Can we bring up these images? Because you're not going to think this is a smartwatch. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, and I think that's really the key part. I think wearables needs not to be a droppables, device that you left after a few weeks, and so we have to fix the earlier shortcomings of this generation of device in order to appeal to much more people. So first, and I think first and foremost, is to find ways not to add any extra routine in our life. And the first of it is recharge.
Recharging the battery.
This device is actually a watch that works with a standard battery cells for a few months or 8 months. You change the battery, but you do not have to think about something extra, something more. Then it has no LED display and stuff, just small trackers that give you the incidental information. And it really, we try to apply a lot of what's been talked earlier, is this little piece of information that will provide me extra motivation is in this tracker that is in blue here that show me my progress.
Oh, the blue line is
against
the tracker.
my daily
against your goal.
Okay. And that's the only information I can have by the eye blink. So most time, and whether there is some sunlight or shade, I always read time, and I always know where I am at against my progress. Wow. Then all the rest, and it's hidden, is happening on the app with the most proper form, or getting analytics, extra motivation, competition with your friends, etc. But the first thing is that I think it's the very first true wearable. It's not a wishful words or wishful thinking.
Clever.
And it serves a purpose. And the purpose is to be impacting our behavior on the long term.
Yeah, and I noticed there's no crown for winding. What was the decision there?
I think the sophistication speak out by what is lacking, and it's like this crown because it's just magically reset the time from your iPhone. So you drop from the plane, and it will change time automatically. You do not have to think about it and resetting time on this actual watch.
Wonderful. I know we'll have some conversation about this a little bit more because there's questions about distribution. How do you get these to people? You think this is ready to go mainstream?
Yeah, and I think that our challenge as tech developer provider is to do more and more simple, and we have to mean it. If we do not do it more simple, then we appeal to people who accept more with more complexity in their life, geeks or early adopter, to go wider. And I think that's the first of the next generation. There will be a lot of this true wearable in the years to come. We have to appeal with more simplicity.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of talk about the smartwatch category. Obviously, some of us were all sporting. What are you wearing? You wearing?
Activité.
Oh, same one. Okay, nice.
La même chose.
Nice. You're already shipping the product, is that right?
Yes, just starting this week. Yeah.
Just this week, okay. But we don't hear as much about smart clothing. And that's why I want to talk to Stéphane, because I think we're going to hear a lot more about smart clothing as time goes. You're a little bit ahead of this. Why clothing at OMSignal?
Good question. Let me answer with the live survey here. Show of hands, please. Who is right now wearing a watch? Please. Who is wearing jewelry? Who is absolutely naked, has no clothes? I rest my case. Clothing is the most universal behavior. It's the one type of wearable form factor you've been wearing your entire life. At OMSignal, we believe, in fact, that textile is a very powerful form of hardware when it comes to wearable, because it's malleable, it's very human, and it can come in infinite forms and diversity. So we are shipping the first ever collection of biometric smartwear. Okay. It's a collection of biosensing shirts that collect pretty deep data about yourself. I'm wearing one right now. My shirt is biostreaming my body onto my iPhone, and from there into the cloud. We sell directly to consumers at omsignal.com. We also work with fashion brands. We can talk about Ralph Lauren, as was mentioned earlier. We did launch at the US Open. Interesting early data from our shipping. There's 3 features that people seem to appreciate the most. One is a little bit as expected, the report about the workouts, because this first version is targeted at fitness. It includes breathing and pretty deep data about your training zones and so on. 1. 2 is the fitness test. So there's a trainer in the app that tells you to do a few things, and then it estimates how fit you are, gives you a grade. I'm happy to report I'm a B. I was a C, but a month and a half working every day, I'm now a B. Yes. And the third one is the push function. It's an algorithm that estimates the explosive exertion during your workout. So these are algorithms.
So you measure some kind of peak performance. Is that it?
You know, heart rate acceleration,
Got
a
it.
few metabolic, a few biological drivers to give you this this focus. And so, you know, one of the learnings early on is that people like, you know, algorithms that make it simple to engage and learn and improve and change your behavior.
So you use the word fashion, and in the relationship with Ralph Lauren, that's obviously very heavy fashion-oriented, but at the same time, we're talking a group of fitness enthusiasts.
Yeah.
Where do you see that going? Are these two different markets in the future? Does it converge? What's going on?
Great question. We're a smart clothing platform, so we built the Lego blocks to develop a variety of smart clothing products. The first one that we decided to do is towards fitness, because this cluster of people in our trial were clamoring for it even louder than the other cluster. But we're working on products that have nothing to do with fitness. You know, think about you know, wellness, lifestyle in general. So it's just the first product on our platform.
Now, obviously, as a parent, it comes to mind that there might be something that you would be interested in monitoring the health and wellness of your children, not just their location, but their actual health. So I could see various categories emerge.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, over time, our anticipation is that you'll go to the store, you'll buy a shirt, a bra, you know, clothes, and you won't even ask. It will be a connected object.
Just automatically.
That's going to be the norm.
Like today, we don't ask when you buy a house, does it have electricity?
Exactly.
It just does.
Or when you buy a car, you know, we expect there to be a dashboard.
Right, yeah, that's actually a better comparison, isn't it? Because the dashboard is informative. It gives you feedback and helps you optimize. That's great. I like that. You know, interestingly, David was asking a question backstage about where these things are going to get distributed, whether it's talking smart shirts, smart watches, or what have you, because I bought this from an electronics retailer, something like a Fnac. Your watches are in Fnac, correct? But where else? Can you get them outside of the technology realm into some other kind of distribution?
Yeah, so it's really the first of our, you know, first device of our portfolio to go beyond this traditional consumer electronics channel, and I think it's for a reason is that it's a genuine approach, you know, for a truly, you know, fashionable device, and that's what, you know, new channel or traditional channel for watch are looking at, you know, truly beautiful devices, and it will be at retail, at department store, you know, for watch.
Well, you know, David brought up yesterday, there must be, what, thousands of places to buy watches in Paris. Does that make it easier to, I mean, am I reflecting your, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think there's a tension, which is you want to be in as many retail doors as possible, but you also want people to understand what the product does. Yeah. So in some ways, by having it look like a beautiful Swiss watch, it sort of disguises the fact that it is connected, and so it both seems like an opportunity and a challenge in order to communicate that wirelessness.
How do you deal with that?
No, so I think it's...
Have you considered putting a big antenna on the side or something?
Or a blinking LED, but that's really where the challenge is, and we are still in a very, you know, innovation-driven market and type of product that needs to be educated, or people needs to be educated about. It does not shout out the sophistication and the sensor part, again, for a reason, but that brings new challenge for this kind of challenge, for sure.
I want to pick on the word challenges here because we're talking about challenges from your perspective of getting to market, developing the technology, and so on. But every time I talk to anyone about the future of wearables, the first challenge they bring up is privacy, data.
Oh, I thought you were going to say battery.
Yeah. Oh, actually, that's the second one. What do you think about battery?
Well, I've got one. I have a little device here from a company in Boston called Sunsprite.
Okay.
And it measures your exposure to bright light in case you're depressed this time of year, as we all
Many
are.
people will be.
But what's neat is there's nowhere to charge it, and there's no way to exchange the battery in it, but instead it just uses solar. So it gets light. You know, it makes itself healthy by getting light, and then it makes you healthy by getting the light as well. So,
nice.
But I just, you know, have you considered putting solar on some of the products that you make as a way? I mean, it seems like solar versus parasitic harvesting of motion is the other approach.
Yeah.
So definitely, and it's all about convenience. And as you say, the first shortcoming today is battery life. So for sure, it comes across, you know, housing, size, you know, a lot of engineering constraint. But that's an obvious track for us is to find ways again to not add all these extra routines that, you know, geeks and tech guys like us might accept.
So 12 chargers
because
next to your
we
bed.
are building some things that goes again much beyond the tech sphere. So obviously haptics and
maybe when you step on your Withings scale, it'll like compress. It'll compress
absorb
and
energy,
then charge it. Nice.
You're laughing, but our head of intelligent textile, Joanna Berzowska from MIT Media Labs, and she does clothing. It's experimental stuff, that creates electricity just by wearing
just
clothing.
by your motion.
You could put a piezo in the
energy.
arm.
I mean, it's not ready for kind of mass production yet. You got to time this right? Because you bring in so many new technology concepts. At some point, you're just hurting yourself, hurting your bill of material if you go too fast in adopting these new technologies. But this will happen fast. A lot of these technologies are just about to come to maturity.
Well, and that's part of what JP was talking about. Is 2015, we believe at Forrester, is an important year. But I want to come back to the privacy issue because I raised it. JP, is privacy going to stop 2015 from being important for wearables?
Privacy is definitely a key issue that everyone has to contend with in some fashion. Interestingly, from our own data, you guys saw some of the data that I presented earlier, half of American online adults say that Google Glass gives them privacy concerns. That's a very high number because not everyone's even heard of Google Glass. But when you ask those people, that half that say, I'm concerned about privacy, 45% of them, which is statistically even with the rest of the population, say, I'm interested in Google Glass at the right price. So people are very conflicted. And I think as with many things in our lives, if you recall Mint.com, for example, purchased by Intuit, people gave away all their financial information readily as a trade-off for the convenience and value that they were getting. So if these things are valuable, people will be a little bit more forgiving on privacy.
And I have to say, I remember in 1998, as a retail analyst, being told that no one was ever going to shop at Amazon.com. I don't think I need to ask for a show of hands whether anyone ever has bought something online. In this room, certainly. So we will probably overcome it, but at the same time, I can't just say, oh yeah, it'll all go away, right? What should companies be doing to make sure that, what are you doing too? JP, you had an answer, then you guys jump in.
One point that I'll make is, you saw my Virgin Atlantic example. That was a very interesting one because people wondered, are you actually recording us as customers? So it doesn't even have to be warned by you for there to be a privacy concern. But in the case of Virgin Atlantic, what they've said is when customers walked into the upper class lounge, immediately it created a conversation. And the agent would say, I'm not recording you. This is to provide benefits to you, and it worked very well.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
well,
any thoughts?
One of the things to make it concrete at home signal, we gather a pretty deep signal about yourself. Right now, I'm actually tracking my ECG on a continuous basis, the electrical signature of my heart, breathing, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So even in the architecture of our server, we've built it such that you can identify whose data it is, because people feel very strongly about biological data, in the US, even more than about their financial information. So our policy is, of course, we don't want to evolve as an island, so we will do some sharing, but the guiding light's the consumer, and just want to make sure that we're not ahead of the maturation of the consumer. It's like maps. Facebook's still having privacy difficulties. Everybody's using Maps, everybody's using Facebook, but you kind of move forward in a paced fashion.
Yeah. Can I ask a question? If Kaiser Permanente or some big healthcare system came to you and said, we want to offer subsidies, we want to offer discounts on smart clothing or on scales for people to share their data, would you do that deal?
But we've had early discussions. We decided not to engage at this point in time. We'll see how the future unfolds, what's in the interest of the consumer. But at this stage, it's our read that it would be too soon, and it's unclear that it's right now in the interest of the consumer.
And I think to answer the same question, I think it's first to be very explicit on who starts this process of this sharing. So there are obvious and actually not really new process where any kind of sharing at Withings, from Withings account is explicitly started from the end user who owns the data. And we get asked many times on, I would like to share my data with this application, with that services. We have now more than 140 partners Partners might be an app editors, very popular application.
I share my Withings data with my Lose It, which is a calorie tracking app.
That's a great services for
example.
weight loss, and there are so many ways for you to value and leverage this data that we have been very happy to plug through our PID services. But the equation is very simple. It always starts from the end user, including with a partnership with Kaiser Permanente. This will be a question to the end user. I just want to remind two facts, and I think, and we need to remind that is first there are some laws, and we pride ourselves, in France to be very strong on privacy, etc. In fact, we are not. I mean, it's everywhere the same, and the same legitimate question comes, and there are laws, everywhere in the US, in France, on how not to use nominative private data without your prior explicit consent. Right. And these laws exist, since bank card system or mobile logs are sensible private information. If your bank is sharing without your consent information about your purchase, they have a problem with the laws, and they have a problem with their brand and the trust they have with their users. So it's not that a new subject. It has to be tackled and answered, and we need to also to find ways to, again, have the sharing be more and more convenient for the end user who asks for it.
Great. I like your reasonable yet still optimistic ability to address the issue but move forward. Before we run out of time, I want to ask a question about Apple, Google, Microsoft. These are all companies trying to get in here, perhaps in some geographies, Amazon. Certainly Facebook has an opportunity in China, Bibo. These are all companies that I think are going to make a play for wearables. Is that a problem or an opportunity?
Well, I mean, first, they have no choice. Think about it. Like we like to characterize it as the battle of the biosignal. Your biological signal says a lot about your health, says a lot about your emotions, about your feeling, about your activities, your lifestyle. It's very fundamental information. So if you're one of these digital platforms, you need to get biosignal into your cloud. So logically, you're going to want to position yourself as a hub, and you'll want the privileged on-ramp of that biosignal into the hub. So you're going to launch some wearables yourself, like the Apple Watch or the Google Glass. Very rational. So if you're one of the big guys, we haven't heard about Facebook or Amazon doing that kind of stuff, but theoretically, it's very critical information for them to acquire. Now, I think it's in the interest of the consumer and the ecosystem that there's multiple hubs, not just one hub.
So that they compete with each other aggressively. Yes, exactly. I agree.
So as somebody involved with a wearable company, that's, I think these guys are natural, early market makers, but hopefully there's multiple.
Don't you think it's the fashion brand's game to lose?
Well, that's a good point. I mentioned none of these fashionable companies. So let me ask you though, they have a lot of power, these Apples and Googles and so on. So if Apple calls tomorrow and says, we want in your space, we can either do it by buying you or we can just go around you. What do you say? Cedric?
I think to answer your previous question first, I think first it's a huge opportunity for Withings and all the other companies in the ecosystem, because what these giants are saying is big consumer tech, consumer devices are becoming relevant for tomorrow's healthcare.
Yes.
And that is a message we've been conveying for years, and we really believe that, again, the future of healthcare happen with the things we wear, the things we have around us at home. We need to change the way we do prevention, we do management of chronic disease, we do compliance, we change, revolutionary compliancy. So they help, obviously a lot conveying this message with much more muscle. Then in terms of the ecosystem, I think, first there will be several platforms, several clouds, and second, there will be a lot of different devices, and one of the challenges of Apple is that when they launch a new device, it has to sell in tens of millions to be a success. So will they tomorrow launch, any kind of scale or, anything? I think it will be a challenge.
So it's interesting. JP was telling me earlier that he likes to remind people that wearables has an S on the end for a reason, Because as we've seen here already, there's multiple categories. I mean, you're talking about cameras on your lapel. There's so many more of these devices to come. So we're being told we're going to wrap up in the next 3.5 minutes. So in those minutes, I'm going to make a closing prediction of my own, and then I'm going to ask you each, we'll start at JP and work our way down here, to say something you think about 2015. Any kind of prediction or projection. You could suggest that Apple will buy you. That's fine with me. I'm going to predict this. I'm going to predict that this time next year, at a minimum, 10 million people around the world will have an Apple Watch. Now, that could mean many other watches will also rise with that tide. I hope and believe so, but I'm going to put it out there, 10 million. JP, your top prediction for 2015?
I agree with your prediction, of course, and I'm going to make two predictions. One is that Google Glass will be seen in 2015 as primarily an enterprise play. The dynamism of all the developers is there, and companies are finding real value from it. And I think that Stefan will like my second one. I think the clothing category is going to find its voice in 2015. Okay. And there are many players, including OhmSignal and its partners, who are doing this. And I think our data itself shows that there is a latent need and that people will see the value.
Stefan?
Well, you took one of mine.
I'm sorry.
I think we're going to be talking a lot in 2015 about the convergence of the worlds of fashion and tech. There's right now like a gulf of difference between these two worlds. This is going to be a big deal. If you're wearing something, by definition, it's a gesture of self-expression. It's identity affirming. There is some fashion in there. And when you work with the fashion brands, you see that they do stuff that the tech folks do not do. So this convergence is going to be topical in the year to come.
Perfect. Cedric?
I fully agree with this previous one, but I think by the end of 2015, we will stop talking about Internet of Things. Because I really think that, today we feel like, a .com but there are products that are becoming more relevant or smarter because they are connected for very specific features that, like David said earlier, and devices that are gadgets that becomes connected gadgets, and we will be forgetting at the end of next year. So I think it's the end of the Internet of Things.
Excellent. I like that. And David?
My prediction is that we'll be buying products through our friends' photos. So the photos that you're posting on Twitter and that you're posting on Facebook will have buy buttons, and there will be robots that are finding the products automatically in those photos, and some number of companies will be making money off of the affiliate fees by brokering those transactions.
Excellent, excellent. And I bet you know a company that would love to help people with that. Well, I'd like to thank these wonderful panelists. We are actually finishing on time, which has not happened yet today, so I'll take a little bit of measure of pride in that. What an amazing topic this is. That explosion that I'm describing, where the center of gravity around mobile pushes all these devices and services back out into our worlds around us, I think is a very significant step change in the way we interact with technology. And all of these predictions, I believe, whether they come true in the next 12 months or the next 18 to 24, I think we're on track for a very interesting future. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. Thank you, David, Cedric, Stefan, JP.